With spring right around the corner, I'm ready to start decorating my house with some more color and some more greenery and even a few splashes of Easter. Hey everyone, thanks for coming to hang out with me today. My name is Jess. I'm really excited to get crafting. I hope you are too. Let's get started. One of my favorite things to grab at the Dollar Tree are these small wooden trays. I also grabbed a pack of the giant craft sticks from Walmart, and I'm going to use a few pieces of greenery and a few Easter eggs for this centerpiece as well. I also grabbed a glass. This is just from the regular glassware section, but you could use any type of container or candle holder. I started by using some hot glue, and I added some to the top of one container and I glued them together. Next, I took my giant craft sticks and I measured how far up I wanted them from the top of the container. For these ones, I was able to actually just cut these giant craft sticks right in half. They're about 10 inches long, so I made sure that I cut each one down at the 5-inch mark. And you always know that I love to use my paper trimmer to cut my craft sticks because it just makes it so much easier. Another favorite tool of mine that I keep in the craft room are these miter shears. They make cutting craft sticks to points really simple because you can adjust the angle on the shear itself. Now, if you don't have a pair of these, you could, of course, just use a pair of scissors, or you could leave the craft sticks rounded at the top. I think it would make this centerpiece just as cute. I just wanted to cut mine into a point because I wanted it to look like a picket fence. Because I was using the giant craft sticks, I only needed 16 pieces altogether to fit around my box. If you're using a different size wooden crate, or if you're using smaller craft sticks, you may have to adjust the total number that you'll need. For this crate and these sticks, I was able to fit 5 across on each of the long sides, and on the shorter sides, I spaced 3 across. Next, I grabbed some white chalk paint and I started doing a heavy dry brushing all over the container. This is where you can kind of get creative and customize this to fit your style. I like neutral colors, so I always like to use the white chalk paint, and I do like some of that wood grain showing through, which is why I like to do the dry brushing. But you could paint this a really bright fun color, or you could even stain it your favorite wood stain as well. If you wanted to create the centerpiece for Easter specifically, you could wrap some Easter ribbon around the center of this crate. I wanted to keep mine more neutral so that I could decorate it for different holidays and different seasons. So I just grabbed a piece of this thinner jute cord that I get from Amazon. I wrapped it around the center, and then rather than tying a bow and adding it to the center of the box, I offset it just a bit and added it to the right side of my box. Once I had a piece of floral foam glued into place, I used my glass jar that I was going to put my candle in, and I pressed it into the center so that I would have an idea of where I could place greenery and what space I needed to leave open in order to put the glass back in there. So once I had my mark down of where I needed that glass to be, then it was time to just have some fun with some pieces of greenery. I don't know about you, but I always have this giant Ziploc bag of greenery laying around from other pieces of floral that I've taken apart and used and then put back in the bag. So this is a great way to use up some of these scrap pieces of greenery. I added some greenery around the edges, and then because there were a few spaces in between some of the craft sticks where I created the fake fence, I added some of the pieces of greenery to look like it was growing out through the fence too. I thought that was really cute. Once I had the box filled in how I liked it, I grabbed a pack of these speckled Easter eggs, and I decided to tuck a few in also. You could leave this box decorated how you like it if you just want it for spring, but I wanted this to go from spring to Easter and then maybe into summer also. So I took some barbecue skewers, I poked some of these plastic eggs onto the skewers, and I just tucked them in here and there in between all of my florals. The Dollar Tree always has a bunch of different wreath forms, and one of my favorite ones to keep an eye out for are the bicycle wheels. In addition to one of those, I'm going to use some macrame cord I got from Amazon, some burlap ribbon, and of course some more spring florals. I started by using my macrame cord, and I measured around the wheel itself 1.5 times. Once I had the length that I needed, I cut 2 more pieces so that I had 3 pieces total that were 1.5 times as long as the wheel is round. I used a piece of painter's tape to hold the 3 strands of cord together, and then I used another piece to tape it to my work surface. Next, I laid all of the strands out evenly, and I just started doing a simple 3-strand braid the whole length of the 3 ropes. Before moving on, I did want to point out that I've had issues with these bicycle wheel wreath forms in the past where the spokes aren't always completely attached in the center. All I do to remedy that is just add a small amount of hot glue on the back side and let it cool down, and it just keeps those spokes in place. It's really helpful to have a silicone mat when you're attaching the rope to the bicycle wheel. They actually started selling these silicone mats at the Dollar Tree, and they work really well. I haven't had any issues yet with the hot glue sticking to mine. It comes off pretty easily. You just sometimes have to make sure that the glue is really cooled down before you try to move your project. So you can see here, I'm just taking my hot glue, I'm running a small amount around the outside edge of the bicycle wheel, and I'm laying the rope flat down on top of it. Once I had my braid glued down the whole way around the wheel, I cut off the one end with the painter's tape, added a small amount of hot glue, and then I laid the other end on top of it. You can see here the silicone mat really comes in handy because once I had put some of that hot glue down on the end, I was able to just fold it up over to hold it in place, and then that way I didn't burn my fingers. To create the bow for the side of the wreath, I took my burlap ribbon and I measured 2 pieces at 18 inches in length. I folded them over so they formed a loop. Once I had both pieces formed into loops, then I took a piece of jute cord, I cinched the centers together, and I tied it in place to create a double bow. I cut off a smaller piece of ribbon, and then I cut the seams off of each side so that it was slightly narrower than the actual ribbon itself. And because it had this pretty lace detail in the middle, I wanted that to show off. So with my shorter piece that I cut the ends off of, I just used some hot glue and I wrapped that around the center to give it a nice finished look. And I had also cut a third piece that was about 18 inches long, and that's what I'm going to use as the tails for my bow. I wanted to attach a few florals to the bicycle wheel before I put the bow on. I grabbed 2 bouquets that I really liked. These are from the Dollar Tree. They have a couple different types of flowers on them. I bent them so that they were about the same shape as the bicycle wheel, and I'm just using some floral wire to wire the 2 of them together. Once I have them all secured in place, then I'm using the same floral wire and I'm attaching it to the side of the bicycle wheel. Next, I tied on my bow using some of the same jute cord that I had used to tie around the center of it, and then I just started having fun with the different floral picks that I had in my stash. I wanted to keep this more for spring and not Easter, so I'm just using florals on mine, but if you wanted to make it more for Easter, you could tuck in some more of those foam Easter eggs, or if you really wanted to make it for Easter, instead of adding a bow to the side of the bicycle wreath, I think it would look really cute if you added on a stuffed bunny, or I know I've seen some of those little bunny butts around too, and I think that would look really cute on the side of this wreath. When I was going through my tote of Easter craft supplies, I realized that I had a lot of these blank bunnies, so I decided to create a fun bunny trio. I have a wooden bunny here that's kind of tall and thin, and then I have a short, chunky bunny head, and of course a galvanized bunny as well. For each of these, I decided to give them a different paint color. For the short, chunky bunny head, I painted it white with some chalk paint. For the taller, thinner bunny, I painted that pink, and then the medium-sized galvanized bunny, I painted that a turquoise color. Once all my paint was dry, then I could start adding in designs to the different bunnies. For the smallest bunny, I'm using some yellow chalk paint, and I'm actually just using a pencil here. I'm using the eraser part of it to add some polka dots. Once I had all of the bigger polka dots put on this bunny, then I went back in with a stylus tool and added some smaller polka dots in between. On the largest bunny, I wanted to create some stripes. I'm using some painter's tape. I laid one piece down, then I ripped off a small piece to act as a spacer so I could lay my next piece down, and I did that the whole way across the bunny. Once I had all of my tape in place, then I used some white chalk paint, and rather than going with a solid coat of paint, I did some dry brushing so that the stripes themselves had a little bit of a distressed look. Rather than giving my medium-sized bunny a design, I decided he needed a bow tie. I grabbed some of this shimmery pink ribbon out of my stash and I just looped it over to create a small bow tie. I also wanted to mention that out of the 3 bunnies, this is the only one that I gave 2 coats of paint to because it was that galvanized metal. I wanted to make sure that all of that metal got covered up. The last thing I needed to do was get all of my bunnies connected together. I'm using the tallest bunny in the back, and then because I have this middle bunny, I'm using some of this Fix-All adhesive from the Dollar Tree, which is just like E6000. I laid a small amount of that down first, and then I added hot glue around it so I had that long-term, short-term hold. And then for the chunky bunny, I placed him off to the right side of the other 2 bunnies, and I just used some hot glue for that one. You could either hot glue a ribbon to the back of this to hang it or just prop it up on a bookshelf or table. The Dollar Tree has some great blanks to make a quick and easy craft using your Cricut or cutting machine. I found this really fun blank sign that had a wooden bead hanger. I cut out a decal on my Cricut that says Hello Spring, and I grabbed some ribbon and florals. The first thing I did was add the decal to the bottom right corner of the board. I found this design right in Cricut Design Space, but if you don't have a Cricut, just use some letter stickers or do some hand lettering. To make the bow for my sign a bit more unique, I grabbed 2 types of ribbon. One is a black and white striped ribbon and the other is a black and white gingham ribbon. I used some hot glue on one end of the piece of ribbon and I hot glued the gingham to the center of the striped ribbon. I didn't want to add any hot glue throughout the center of the ribbon because it would seep through and you would be able to see it, so I just applied it to the ends. After I had the 2 ribbons attached to each other, then I could proceed making a simple bow where you loop it together, cinch it in the center, and add some tails. To finish off this craft, I dug around in my giant bag of random pieces of greenery and florals. I picked out a few that I liked for spring. I added them to the corner of the sign. Then I just added some hot glue to my bow and put it in the corner. When I saw these gingham ribbons at the Dollar Tree, the first thing I thought about making was a garland. In addition to those, I grabbed some rope, some jute twine, and some fun Easter ribbon. In between the bunnies on the garland, I wanted some tassels to hang down, so I'm using this white jute cord and my sanding block. I laid a piece of the jute across the sanding block and then I started wrapping it around the block about 20 times or until I thought it was thick enough. Then I tied the 2 ends of the piece that I had already laid down and I cut the other side off with my scissors. I used another piece of jute cord and I tied it down about 1 inch from the top of the tassel. Once I had that in place, then I used that Easter ribbon that I had to create a band over top of the jute cord. Once my band was hot glued in place, then I just needed to trim the ends of the tassels so that they were all even. To assemble my garland, I wanted to create loops on either end of my rope. I folded the end over and then I added a little hot glue. Then using that same Easter ribbon, I just wrapped it around the 2 ends so that it would give it a finished look. I lined up the 2 ends of my garland and folded it in half. At the center point, I started with one of my gingham bunnies. I added a bit of hot glue right towards the top of the bunny's head, right under its ears, and I just hot glued it right to the center of my garland. From there, I just spaced out 2 more sets of bunnies from the center of the garland back to the ends. I used some hot glue to keep those in place. Then I went back through in between all of my bunnies and I tied on my tassels. I didn't tie them on too tight so that I would be able to slide them around and adjust them as I needed to. thanks for coming to craft with me today. Let me know in the comments if you've started decorating for spring yet. All right, everyone, have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.